Bonjour, ça va?
Ah, les Mahmoud Saïd.
Valérie Didier-Hess, you are art specialist in the Department of Impressionist and Modern Art at Christie's in Paris. And before relocating to Paris in 2017, you worked at Christie's in Dubai in the Department of Modern and Contemporary Middle Eastern Art. And during your time at Christie's, you co-wrote with Dr. Hussam Rashwan the Catalogue Raisonné of Egyptian modern artist Mahmoud Saïd, published in Skira in 2016. And I have to mention that this publication dedicated to Middle Eastern artists has been the very first of its kind. Your book includes both paintings and drawings by the artist, 382 paintings, 379 drawings, and 238 documents and photographs, archival material. So my first question for you is, can you tell us exactly what is a catalogue raisonné and what does it bring to the oeuvre of an artist, especially for an Arab artist like Mahmoud Saïd?
Sure. Well, thank you for having me, Arthur. It's an honor, and it's also a bit emotional to talk again about this book that I realized we launched exactly 4 years ago already. And yeah, so the Catalogue Raisonné, it was exactly as you said, the first of its kind for a Middle Eastern artist. The whole purpose was to document and to archive every single work that we could find or that we knew of by Mahmoud Saïd, whether it's a painting or a drawing. And this is the core of a catalogue raisonné. There is no translation in English. There is no translation in Arabic, although there was a whole debate around that. And it really is a comprehensive, almost like an encyclopedia on one single artist. And the aim is really to illustrate wherever possible, in good quality wherever possible, and to provide really the ID card of every single painting. So ID card for a painting means what? It means that obviously, well, the artist, we have him, the title, any inscription on the back, on the reverse, on the front, the date of execution, the medium, the size. That's the main ID of the painting. And then we go into the more details where we seek the provenance. Provenance meaning the history of the work, who it belonged to initially, if it was commissioned, if it was a gift, who it passed on after. So that's for provenance. Then we have a section on bibliography. So anywhere the work was mentioned or illustrated, any article, any book, any monograph, anything where this work features. And finally, exhibitions where the work we know was lent. So this, in a way, this is the kind of due diligence that is done for every single painting, wherever it was possible, obviously. Some works we managed to see, others were more difficult of access, but wherever possible, that's what we did. So physically inspecting the work, looking on the back, remeasuring it, and asking and digging for provenance. So that's the core of the Catalogue Raisonné. Ours is maybe a little bit, goes a little step further compared to the standard Catalogue Raisonné in the sense that we added in the volume 2 a whole section dedicated to archives because we thought it was important to publish these postcard, photographs, letters, which are all primary sources. Yeah. So instead of them being inaccessible for researchers, for example, we publish them. Also because it gives a good context to an artist like Mahmoud Saïd. So for the West, I would say for the Western academics or for people who study art history but who are not familiar with Middle Eastern art, it also gives a bit of a historical context to Mahmoud Saïd. In order to also place him within the more general timeline of the history of art.
Yeah. So can you introduce us to the painter Mahmoud Saïd?
Yeah, so Mahmoud Saïd, born in 1897, died in 1964. He's there on your photograph at the top left corner. So he was he was a member of a quite wealthy aristocrat family in Alexandria. He's actually the uncle of Queen Farida, who is Safina Zulfikar, so his niece. So he was very well connected in, I would say, the high-end class of Alexandria. He trained actually to be a lawyer and became a judge at the mixed courts of Alexandria. There he is. And so art was really a hobby, or more a passion, that he really kept on the side, because his job was to be a lawyer and a judge, and a very successful one too. But given the production he did and how stable it was, and how much he also exhibited and how many exhibitions he had during his lifetime, but also after, I think it really shows that art was a real part of his life. So a bit more than a passion, I would say. And the whole debate and the whole tension in Mahmoud Said's life all throughout his artistic career was to how to also reconcile this job as a lawyer and being in this world of the courts with his more liberal, I would say, side and more artistic side of being a painter, which really was his passion.
Yeah. So in an interview conducted by the Italian poet Jean Moscatelli in 1936, Mahmoud Saïd talked about his trips to the Netherlands, to Belgium and Italy in the early 20s. He explained how he was attracted to some European artists like Giovanni Bellini, Van Eyck, or El Greco, and how he was inspired by their works. In your book, you wrote the essay entitled Mahmoud Saïd, Pioneering Dialogue with European Art. Is it easy to work on an Arab artist, separating the Western point of view? Because in your book, you aim to show that Saïd's works were not only pastiches.
Yes, exactly. I think like all good artists, he obviously took first painting classes in Alexandria with Arturo Zanieri, with Casonato da Forno, who were more tutors and in their private studios. But he also went in the early 1920s to Paris, where he took drawing classes. And we know that he traveled a lot throughout Europe to also educate his eye. And I think that's the best way actually to learn to absorb not only a specific style, so not only studying with one specific professor, but educating and being aware of a more general overview of art history. And that's why he specifically said, as you said, that he was inspired by the Flemish artists, by the Renaissance, by also the Impressionists. So it's a very eclectic inspiration, but it's not really, it's not really an inspiration. It's more that he was aware of everything that had been produced in terms of European art, going from the Middle Ages to the 1920s when he went. He was fully aware and very educated and cultivated from that side. And he managed to integrate, to cherry pick what seemed to him a tool to interpret his own style. And I think that's where you see he's a very good and smart artist, is that, and that's what was also challenging actually for my article, was to find paintings that visually you can see that he's influenced, but he's not directly influenced. It's really he's taking a tiny bit or a tiny theory or principle, aesthetic principle from a certain style, and then interpreting it completely in his own style for his own subject. And for example, to take the Giovanni Bellini or Jan van Eyck, how they inspired him. I mean, it seems a bit far-fetched when you say it like that, but it was much deeper than just a visual influence. It's more the atmosphere, the spirit, the strength, and the visual power that comes out of these paintings, and how he translates them into his own composition. So either using similar architectural devices, for example, or a similar light or a similar approach. For example, this slide you have up, you can see that there is some kind of connection with the background of this self-portrait, and the way Bellini painted the San Marco Plaza, and how there's a link, although it's not a direct visual link, it goes way beyond that. And that's where Mahmoud Saïd is very clever. And in the end, he remains very faithful to his own style and to his own feelings and emotions, and how he translates that onto a painting. So I would say that it's not just Mahmoud Saïd going to Europe and copying everything he could see. It's really educating his eye, and this is a very good example on your slide. Is that unfortunately this painting of Saint George killing the dragon by Mahmoud Saïd? We don't know the location, but we found it in an exhibition catalog. Hence, we got at least the image. So again, it goes back to my point that we really try to include every single artwork we know of Mahmoud Saïd in a catalogue Raisonné, even if it's a black and white image, but at least it's a reference. And in this particular example, most likely he was aware at least of Carpaccio, and most likely he saw this painting, especially considering he painted San Giorgio Maggiore. It's in the catalogue Raisonné, so he must have seen this painting. But he reinterprets it in his own way, trying probably to learn from more. It's not even the posture, it's more the movement and the strength and the power of Saint George killing the dragon, and how he reinterprets that in a more exotic and Egyptian landscape, but really to teach himself to be inspired by a specific style, but redoing it completely his own way.
Yeah. So in the interview with Jean Moscatelli that I've just mentioned, Mahmoud Saïd also said, after wandering the Netherlands, I was drawn by the Flemish primitive artists, both their paintings and their architecture. He admired, for example, the artist Roger van der Weyden. What attracted the Egyptian painter to the Flemish primitives, and where can we find his inspirations through his works?
I think what you have on your slide again is very well chosen, because it truly illustrates exactly that quote you said from Mahmoud Saïd, is that what touched him and what made him what struck him, I think, in Flemish early Flemish art is what we call the pathos, the emotions, the feeling, the drama that the artists of the 14th, 15th century in the Netherlands managed to express by postures, by their facial expressions, by the interaction between each figure, and how all of that generates the specific feeling, a specific atmosphere. And in this particular case, the Descent from the Cross from Roger van Weyden, how the pathos and the pain emerges from this painting. And in the example you have here by Mahmoud Saïd, so La Mise au Tombeau, it's exactly that. He is, what interests him in this particular scene, I mean, in my opinion, is not the scene itself, it's more the figures and the pain and the pathos and everything that goes around it, in terms of emphasizing the drama and the tragedy of obviously somebody being buried, so somebody who just died. That figure, the female figure holding her head, it's a posture that we find in so many 14th century Italian painting too, so in the more Italian primitives, but also in the Flemish art. And it's an international code for drama. Basically, anybody, whether you've studied art history or not, knows what that means. So he's using these art historical codes, visual codes, but making his own little language with it. And Mahmoud Saïd, in this painting, La Mise au Tombeau, he goes even further with a touch of caricature, I would say, with those black crows that are very graphic in a way, that are flying above the scene to kind of emphasize the drama of what he depicted.
Yeah. So through these examples that we just saw, we understand how learning from Western art was important for Mahmoud Saïd. And as you said, this allowed him to produce his own personal style. In a letter written to Pierre Béppi-Martin in 1927, Mahmoud Saïd told him, "What I'm looking for is radiance rather than light. What I want is internal light, not surface light." The subject of the light you worked on specifically in this essay. So what was this internal light that the artist was thinking?
Well, I mean, this letter to Béppi-Martin, I think, says it all. I mean, kind of sums up actually Mahmoud Saïd's oeuvre, and just flicking through the book, you get a sense of the light. And anyone who I've shown the book to, who had no idea who Mahmoud Saïd was, not even whether he was Egyptian or not, the first reaction that people got were, oh, wow, all these colors and this light in his paintings is extraordinary. So I think it just sums it all up.
Yeah.
Is that this internal light, I mean, it can be interpreted in many ways, but it's more the essence of the paint of the subject represented. Mahmoud Saïd was a very sensitive person. Everybody I met who knew him or knew of him quite directly all said the same thing, that he was a very sensitive man and very delicate. And I think someone capable of feeling a lot of emotions and feelings. And I think through saying this to his friend Béppi-Martin, to say to him, what I'm looking for is the internal light, is really digging in his subject. When he paints La Vue de la Montagne à Douolchouer on your slide, he doesn't just replicate what he's seeing. I mean, this mountain, I've seen it, it doesn't look exactly like that. It's not the point is not, he's not doing realism here. He is really kind of transcending what he sees, putting in his emotions, but also trying to capture the spirit and the atmosphere of what this mountain evokes when he's in front of it. Also, at the same time, being more schematic in a way in his representation, and that shows also the similarity with La Montagne Sainte-Victoire of Cézanne, is that both artists have a almost schematic approach to the subject, because the purpose is to really dig in and to capture the essence and the essentials of the scene. And it's the scene as a whole, not just visually, but the surroundings, the emotions, maybe the light, the actual light, as in the sunlight, or the light that you can see that is falling on Dour Shawer quite dramatically. And it's in that way, that's how Cézanne and Mahmoud Saïd can be compared in a way. And it's, you can, especially I think in Mahmoud Saïd's painting, you can see that you can imagine him in front of this painting, impressed by its size, kind of dominating the whole scene. I mean, it's ready to burst out of the canvas. It's a fabulous painting, and he really dramatizes the depth of this mountain, with this clever foreground of trees, of pine trees, that are building up into the mountain, and then this little village on the side, that shows how far the village is, and then this massive mountain that overlooks the whole scene. So, and also in terms of palette and color distribution, which both Cézanne and Mahmoud Saïd, they both here are looking again at Flemish and Renaissance painting, specifically to aerial perspective. So aerial perspective, which is an optical effect of putting the browns and the darker browns in the foreground, then the middle ground is more in the greens, and then the background is more in the whites and blues. So it creates a perspective, which both use, but in their own separate way, which is quite interesting.
And then you also compared a work from Franz Marc with another painting of Mahmoud Saïd to work on this internal light theme. Also saying that it's a kind of assimilation and reformulation of European art theories on his own works. So here, how did he work on this light to represent this Egyptian landscape?
Well, I mean, this landscape for me it still puts me in awe when I look at it, because I remember the very first time I saw it on the original owner who bought it from Mahmoud Saïd. So this was quite a few years ago now. I remember seeing it on the wall, and it just glowed. Now it was dark, flat in Cairo, and I just remember seeing it, and it just glowed as if there was a hidden light behind it and a spotlight coming from somewhere that I couldn't see that was illuminating it. It has an extraordinary silver light, but at the same time, it's a warm silver light that really transperses the painting. And he achieves that with this contrast of a pure blue pigment, which he daringly uses, and that's why I put that comparative of Franz Marc, which he daringly uses in the horse. So of course the horse doesn't have blue hair, but in Mahmoud Saïd's eye and in the way he saw it, it does. And that's why I couldn't not put the blue horse of Franz Marc. Also because that specific painting is a reference to the Blaue Reiter, this movement that was specifically German expressionists at the beginning of the 20th century, that has a spiritual dimension where colors have a spiritual strength in them and are can awaken certain sensations and feelings for the viewer. And in some ways, Mahmoud Saïd does that with this strikingly dashing blue pigment, like a lapis lazuli that glows into your face, and helps him capture the light that must have been for real in the scene he's painting. So this very warm sunlight that he manages to enhance with a cold pigment, I mean a cold color, which is blue, but he makes it all warm, and he makes it all work together with these effects of reflection and mirroring with the sky. Also, so in a way, also giving his pigments this sort of spiritual dimension that artists like Franz Marc, like Kandinsky, Jawlensky, they all sought to explore in their own works. So hence, again, the juxtaposition of these two works, I think, which are quite meaningful.
Yeah. So Mahmoud Saïd also reinvented Christian iconography. And this leads us to another comparison with the painting of Leonardo da Vinci, The Virgin of the Rocks, and the painting entitled La Famille from 1936.
Yeah.
1936. Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, there's a few paintings where, as we did our research, I couldn't stop thinking of biblical references that obviously Mahmoud Said was aware of and being very cultivated, and having traveled extensively and having visited probably churches and probably having seen the Virgin of the Rocks in person in the Louvre. And he, again, I think why these subjects, these religious biblical subjects, struck him at the time when he saw them or when he studied them, it's again this untangible sensation that emerges from the painting, whether it's this triangular composition in the Virgin of the Rocks that Mahmoud Said reinterprets to depict a family. So it's a family of, probably a woodcutter, because you can guess the axe in his hand, and a felaha in a very simple and bare landscape. But he has there's a very magical light to this painting, this gold light that is so typical of Mahmoud Said, as if it's a mystical light that he probably found or identified in these biblical religious paintings that he would have seen. So whether it's more in the composition, but also in the whole atmosphere created around this beautiful depiction of a family, and you can see there the man has all the power and is overlooking the mother and her child. Again, a very biblical reference to the Virgin Mary. And there are several other paintings where there's one work, again, from around the same years, called La Famille ou la Promenade, where it's the family but on a donkey. And this specific work really looks like the flight to Egypt, actually. I mean, the biblical subject, the flight to Egypt. So it's just biblical references that may have struck him when he saw them and studied them, and how they come up to his mind to then depict a certain specific subject. He also painted Adam and Eve, but in a very daring way, because it's a black man and a white lady, and it's his own interpretation of the creation of man in a way. So it's also specific biblical references, but I think it's more importantly, it's again this intangible internal light or sensation that comes out from these biblical subjects.
Yeah,